Now, before we go anywhere, I can already hear you through your screen. Obviously, putting the words realistic and fantasy together in a sentence is like looking for a fish that can swim through lava. However, being the fantastical nerd that I am, I recently wrote up a script. Well, actually two, though the second leans marginally more into historical fiction than true fantasy territory, outlining my view on what constitutes a fantasy adventurer, how they behave, and what separates their job function from other medieval factions such as mercenaries, brigands, outlaws, and knightly orders. For those who haven't seen it, the conclusion I came to was that the Adventurers Guild would be a more grounded version of what Witchers are. Essentially, hunter-killers who specialize in the sort of prey that would be beyond the ken or capacity of most other historical factions to combat with conventional weapons and tactics. And what allows them to do this would be their proprietary trove of occultic knowledge and secret wisdom on everything from alchemy to herbology to metallurgy to combat styles, all specifically viewed through the lens of fighting things larger, stronger, faster, tougher, or in any and all other ways more powerful than an ordinary human target. But of course, me being who I am, I couldn't just leave that novel breed of sleeping dog lie there uncontested. No, I had to go and invent a whole-ass new world typography and setting to accommodate my version of the D&D archetype. And since I didn't want to just leave that pile of effusive lore just sitting in the back of my digital filing cabinet until the end of time, I'm presenting it to you here and now. So where do we start? Well, since I've already covered the two most popular aspects of an adventuring guild from the player's perspective elsewhere, I might as well retrain my sights on another, more densely occupied bush this time around. Namely, well, the name. You see, my version of an adventurer is basically a synergistic blend between a medieval Freemason, a man-at-arms, a huntsman, and an exorcist. They go wherever there's coin to be had, and as most of their methods work equally well on humans as they do on the inhuman monstrum, they're not altogether choosy about who or what they're called to exterminate. Whether it be a meddlesome camp of poachers or bandits, a necromantic coven, or a vampire clan or an ancient dragon makes little difference in their book except for the price. And as the word witchers or any sound-alike clone is obviously off the table, I've had to dive into the strange lands of etymological lore to try and pull out a suitable replacement. And here's a summary what I, admittedly with a little help from ChatGPT, came up with. Much like how the Hashashins over time evolved into the Assassins because the latter was easier to say in passing. The original form of Wirdakim, a combination of the Norse word weird, meaning fate or destiny, and the Turkish word hekim for a physician, metamorphically evolved through the ages to the common forms like Wirik, Wirkim, and Wekim, which would each later evolve into terms for an unsanctioned magic user, warlock, an unstable fusion of man and beast, Werkin, and a heretical brand of faithless spiritualists, Wiccans, respectively, eventually turning out the informal terms Wiredex or Wiredux for an unorthodox or niche specialty, and the formal professional title of Wireden, meaning kings or chief of fate. In all cases, the implication is that of a wind-blown semi-mystical surgeon who specializes in righting wrongs that ordinary men cannot. In essence, reconstruing fate, albeit in a slightly less deterministic sense than we're used to. Next, I've already extensively covered the guild, its structure and conduct codes, and so forth elsewhere, so I'll not bore you to death with those autistic details. However, I will take a few minutes to quickly delve into some of the specialties that would almost certainly develop along clan lines within the guild's metastructure. For those who didn't catch the last vid, it seems elementary to my reason that, similar to how a modern military has specialist teams or members who train for certain types of scenarios or for certain operations, medic, intel analyst, engineer, linguist, tech, cyber ops, etc., a Weirdan guild would also have its internal subgroups who would each specialize in handling certain types of jobs. Some would hunt lycans, others undead, others dragons, others would specialize in rooting out bandits or handling goblins, etc. And considering how medieval feudalism structured society, it also seems plausible to me that these Wirvasta, a straight portmanteau of the Old Norse and Romanian words for fate and hands respectively, classes would naturally form and progress their crafts along clan, aka familial lines. Now, obviously, the exact techniques and tactics each individual Wirvast clan would employ entirely depends on the exact lore and nature of their setting. However, since I'm coming at this from a more grounded, that is, low fantasy, perspective, it seems to me that certain clans would necessarily need to evolve certain ethos to survive and procreate under the unique stresses of their profession. For instance, I describe in the other video how a faction of dragon hunters may adopt a practice of sacred martyrdom, something alike the Sisters of Battle or the real-world Hashashins, on account of just how extraordinarily dangerous most iterations of the Great Worm are considered to be. And another idea I had veritably dropped in my lap while drafting that video came by way of the D&D lore maestro, Mr. Rex's latest video on vampire lore. In essence, D&D's conception of the vampire is as a being composed not strictly of physical matter, although they do have a physical body, but of pure, tangible, negative energy, i.e., they are quite literally darkness incarnate, which is why they don't cast shadows or reflections. Light is literally anathema to them. And of course, it's why the sun is one of the few things which can kill a vampire permanently, as it's a direct conduit to the positive energy realm, which destructively interferes with and cancels out a vampire's negative life force. While this clearly doesn't jive with the more grounded sort of fantasy world I'm envisioning, the quintessential point I'm putting us in orbit of is that certain monsters have unique challenges. One or two specific quirks or characteristics which make them uniquely tricky to deal with and which put them beyond the scope of an ordinary human faction's expertise. A dragon's fire, being generally depicted as hot enough to start to liquefy steel in seconds, would not only kill on direct contact, but would kill or severely maim anyone caught within 100 feet of the initial blast. And given their myriad of weaknesses, a vampire's main challenge lies not in defeating, but putting a permanent end to their villainy. Likewise would be the case for the undead of most other varieties, and werewolves would have the additional complexity of the potentially innocent person trapped within the unhallowed body of the feral monster. Would you kill the person to slay the beast? Could you instead contain or perhaps cure them? Or could they perhaps even be coached to be able to seal or even control the inner beast through studious mastery and meditation or certain magical rites? As you can no doubt surmise, this is all just an infinitesimal sampling of how far I could take this unorthodox setting, but I think I'll leave the rest up to your own imaginations for now. Let me know your ideas down below. Although, one last thing I will quickly add in here before I go, however, is that the distinction between a clan and a class in this new paradigm is that a clan can be thought of as a unique military outfit or division, the Airborne Rangers, the Navy SEALs, Force Recon, etc., whereas a class can be thought of as the more ubiquitous tactical roles, mortarman, machine gunner, sniper, demolitions, etc. In other words, a clan is essentially an organization within the organization, while the class is simply a role that any member of any clan may adopt according to his or her strengths and/or the needs of a given situation. And this at last concludes this little restructive overhaul of circa half of the entire fantasy genre as we and our parents' parents have understood it. Hopefully, you at least found it amusing, if not terribly insightful. If you did, and you think some other people might do as well, then consider leaving a like and/or subscribing if you haven't. Also consider heading over to my alternate channels if you're getting as sick of YouTube's meddlesome tomfoolery as I am. I occasionally post videos up to a week earlier on there than on YouTube, if that adds any incentive at all. And of course, don't forget to check out my Amazon book page if you fancy a spot of light avant-garde literature. All links will be down where you'd expect. And with all that said, once again, my friends, until next we meet, stay safe, stay sane, and always remember, you can never think too much, you can only think badly. Peace be upon you.